For coming today. My name is Marla Kirby. I am a member of the steering committee for Livermore Indivisible. And today we're very excited to have a guest speaker. He unfortunately cannot be here in person, but he will join us by Zoom. That's Adam Gray, who's running for Congressional District 13 in the Central Valley. So we'll have him speak with us for an hour more or less. He'll speak and then we'll get some questions, and then after that we will postcard. So thank you all for coming today. We're really excited about this event. So Adam Gray, as I said, is running for California's 13th Congressional District in the Central Valley. That district covers all of Merced County and portions of 4 other counties. So it's really sort of split up. But Livermore and the Tri-Valley are not part of Adam's district. But we're hosting him here today because California 13 is critical for us to win back the House of Representatives. He ran in 2022 and lost by only 564 votes. So we're hoping he will pull it off this time. And we've been working, some of us have been working on his campaign for a while now to help make that happen this year. So Adam is a true son of the Central Valley. He was born and raised in Merced, grew up on a dairy farm and worked in his family's dairy supply and feed store, and attended Merced College before graduating from UC Santa Barbara. After the Great Recession hit his hometown hard in 2012, Adam ran and was elected to the state assembly, where he represented Merced and Stanislaus counties for a decade. He championed bipartisan common sense solutions for the benefit of his constituents. And that meant focusing on what matters most to the Central Valley: water and agriculture, health, public safety, education, and jobs. I'll highlight just some of Adam's record. I don't want to take up all of his time, but there are a few things to note about what he did in the legislature while he was there. On water and agriculture, he led the fight while in the state legislature to ensure funding for water storage projects, repair aging canals, and bolster groundwater basins, all critically needed for the Central Valley residents and agricultural economy. On health issues, Adam secured significant funding to establish a joint medical school at UC Merced and UCSF Fresno to address the valley's historic shortage of doctors, and also passed legislation to expand the operating hours of rural health clinics so that working families are better able to access those clinics around their busy schedules. He also secured coverage of continuous glucose monitors under Medi-Cal. This is particularly important to me. I have diabetes in my family, and anyone who has diabetes in their family knows how important that tool is. And so I thank him for his work on that. When he's elected to Congress, he will protect reproductive rights for women, as well as Social Security for seniors. He also supports transition to green energy and will work toward a more functional immigration system for people who want to come here and make better lives. I just want to say a couple of things about his opponent, the incumbent representative from CA-13, John Duarte. He has endorsed Trump in this 2024 election. He also voted for the impeachment inquiry on President Biden while he's, in the short time that he's been in Congress. He voted for Jim Jordan as Speaker of the House, and then Mike Johnson. So I'm just telling you the kind of person he's running against and why we need to elect Adam Gray. So Adam, I'll let you have the floor now. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. And it's wonderful to see everybody and be with you all today. I'm sorry that I'm not there in person, but we're busy filming campaign commercials that are going to be up here this next few weeks, because we're getting into crunch time of the campaign. But I appreciate the continued support and volunteer efforts that Indivisible and others have undertaken throughout not just these recent weeks, but really for months on end. I think we've had 30 to 50 to 60 to 100 volunteers almost every weekend going on 6 months at this point. And that doesn't even include the numerous people who are writing postcards and making phone calls and text messages from, around the state and in some cases even around the country. Obviously, this is one of the critical seats that will determine whether the Democrats control the House of Representatives or not. I'm a longtime state representative in this area, very proud of my record and a record of, just working to accomplish practical things, right? One of my great frustrations with government in 2024 is it seems to have become an arena of virtue signaling and name calling, and everybody's busy posturing in their respective ideology, and very little is getting done. And people seem to have lost sight of the fact that, we're all Americans working together, hopefully towards a better future for all Americans, and spending our time debating the best ideas around healthcare, infrastructure, the economy. Obviously, water and agriculture have been a very big policy area for me, representing the largest agricultural valley in the world. But healthcare has been another major focus, as those of us who live in rural communities like Merced and the surrounding San Joaquin Valley oftentimes don't have the doctors, nurses, hospitals, healthcare clinics, et cetera, so that folks here can get good care, which also relates to economic growth and opportunity and bring in new businesses. So I spent 10 years in the legislature focusing on those kinds of issues. Working with Governor Brown, with Governor Newsom, we were successful, probably most notably in bringing medical school to the San Joaquin Valley as a part of UC Merced, the 10th and newest campus of the University of California system. And so that's the kind of work I want to carry on in Washington. And given the extreme behavior of the Republican majority in Washington, D.C., which I don't think, frankly, represents Republicans. I mean, there's a lot of good Republicans in my district who I know well, who we may disagree on some policy, but they're good people with the community's best interest, at heart. And what we're seeing in Washington is just a mean-spirited, divisive Republican majority that continues to deliver no results for the American people, even conservative results. They've not managed to get through. In fact, half the time they can't decide who's in charge or if they're going to run the government off of the fiscal cliff or not. So, this is we need a dignified government that we can all be proud of, that's working for the American people. And one of the things I love about the Democratic Party is the diversity in every sense of the Democratic Party. Right? We represent, not only the diverse nature of America, but we also have room for debates amongst ourselves. You see what's happened in this presidential campaign. Democrats have the courage to actually have discussions and debates and disagreements. And we have a big tent. And I think that's going to be appealing to the American people as Republicans continue to be a smaller and smaller tent and demand purity amongst their members, right? That everybody has to agree. And as one of the great generals in American history said, if everybody's agreeing, somebody's not thinking. So, I appreciate you all being with me here today. Apologize that I can't be visiting with you in person, but we're working hard to make sure we have all of the tools to defeat John Duarte and defeat this Republican majority and restore some dignity, some integrity to American government. So thank you, and look forward to answering any questions or chatting with anybody that wants to chat.
Anybody have any questions they want to ask we can ask them over there? Well, I'll just ask a question. What would be your first priority when you're elected to Congress?
Well, I think my priorities in Congress are going to be very similar to my priorities at the state level, and that the two major focal points of my work over the last 20 years have been the University of California, Merced, and more specifically, the effort to build out a full-scale medical school program and hospital that can serve the residents here in the San Joaquin Valley, and then the availability and affordability of clean drinking water and water for our farms that drive the economy here in the San Joaquin Valley. So I hope to continue. One of the things I often share with people is, as our country's become more divided, And as we have self-selected ourselves away from living with each other, urban city communities have become more Democratic and rural communities have become more Republican. And in turn, agriculture has become more Republican leaning. And as somebody who grew up in agriculture, my family's in the dairy business, my grandparents farmed, and on my mom's side in North Dakota, they were wheat and corn farmers, and on my dad's side here in California, farming almonds and pistachios. But being a Democrat who grew up in agriculture and who cares deeply about agriculture, I feel like I'm a bit of an endangered species within the Democratic Party, and people ought to protect me and preserve me because we need people in both parties representing all of our communities across the country, and certainly agriculture, which is such an important industry, so that we have, not only affordable food and produce, but also domestic supplies of food and produce. We've seen during COVID and other challenges how supply chains and other things can be really, really dangerous to our food supply and the affordability of our food supply. So I think I'm an important voice in that space, and I want to continue to do that at the federal level, along with, I hope that I can see through the, the building of a full medical, UC medical hospital facility here in the Valley. I mean, if I can work towards that end at the federal level, that'd be certainly a great honor, and I think make an important contribution to our region.
Anybody else? Oh, no. I'll go ask question. Yeah.
So water is never going to be enough fresh water. Water. I wonder what you do about some of the major water initiatives, particularly the sites around the water. Or so what do you think about that?
I don't think you could hear it.
That was a little rough. What I think I
Yeah.
heard was a question about water, and I thought I heard maybe specifically Sites Reservoir.
Yes, that was right. Yep.
Is that right? Is that the
Yeah.
gist of the question? Is how
Yeah,
do I
he
feel
asked-
about?
Yeah, what do you feel about the state legislative initiatives on water, especially the sites reservoir?
Yeah. So when I was in the legislature, I was a co-author of the water bond in 2014, working with Governor Brown. And of course, in that water bond was $2.75 billion specifically for surface storage projects. And Sites Reservoir was one of the, one of the projects that would, or at the time was seen to be competitive, right, for that pot of money. I know that they're working to put Sites Reservoir in place. I would argue that we should do more than just Sites Reservoir. I think those of us that worked in a bipartisan fashion to pass that water bond envisioned 2 or 3 reservoir projects as a result of it. And the only one we've seen progress on is Sites. Over the past half century, California has grown its state and federal water supply by about 1%. And in the same period of time, we've nearly doubled our population. So the fact that we have anywhere near enough water at this juncture to both feed our farms and as well as support communities up and down the state that are thriving and growing is really a testament to the amount of conservation that's occurred both in the agricultural industry, but also in the population at large with construction and other practices. But I'd like to see a lot more money put into projects, both above ground in the case of surface storage, but also below ground in the case of replenishing our underground aquifers through projects like floodplain restoration and others. So, I'm somebody who sits on the side of you can't double your population and grow your water supply by 1% for 50 years and then wonder what the problem is. We've got to come up with innovative solutions in the water space, both on the conservation side, but also on the supply side. Does that get to the question, or do you want to have a follow-up?
That answered the question. Thank you so much. Anyone else have a question? Yeah, just toggle here. So the question was, what are your thoughts on expanding the Supreme Court?
I think it's an impossible task. And I think it's also one that distracts us from what I think is the more important priority, which is gaining a governing majority in this country. One of the things that I've reflected on over the years is how, in a counterintuitive way, I think the way for our country to kind of heal and move forward isn't to let one side, necessarily beat the other through electoral politics, but rather to demand both parties to put the interest of the country before the interest of their politics and their ideology. And so I could actually see a world where I'm not sure why we seat Supreme Court justices with less than a 2/3 vote. Right. And people would go, oh, well, that's impossible. Then we'd never have any justices. Well, isn't that the point, though, is that if somebody's going to serve on the Supreme Court and essentially adjudicate or be the referee or the umpire of our politics and our public policy, shouldn't that person really be unanimously supported by both parties? Right. Shouldn't the integrity and and the judicial record of that individual meet the standard of everyone? And I think instead, when we have conversations about expanding the Supreme Court, while I certainly understand the desire to do that, given the recent appointments, under Donald Trump, and frankly, the horrible job the Supreme Court does or has done here in recent memory of adjudicating these issues in a way that doesn't look partisan, right? I mean, it looks horrifically partisan, and I think they're really undermining the faith of the American people in that institution. But I think in order to restore the institution, I would go in the other direction, which is how do we restore it to a place where the people who sit on the Supreme Court, whatever their ideology or perspective or background is, meet a standard that we can all feel good about, Republicans, Democrats, Independents alike. And I think the more we talk about expanding the Supreme Court, it will look a bit to a lot of Americans like, oh, well, we don't like the makeup of the court, so we're going to expand it. Again, totally understand the motivation and the desire, given the recent events that we've seen, and some of what the court's done on choice, right? With the Dobbs decision, it's outrageous, right? First time we've seen our country move backwards in a sense as it relates to individual liberties and civil rights, et cetera. And so I get it, but I'm not sure that I think that's the answer.
Okay, thank you. We have another question.
My name is Justin Peterson. What are the top political attacks being leveled against your campaign by your opponent?
What are the top political attacks made against you by your opponent?
Well, there's basically two. The first is when I was in the legislature working with Governor Brown, I was a co-author of the Infrastructure Act. You might see signs around the state that say SB1 next to road projects. And myself and a gentleman named Senator Anthony Cannella, who is a Republican state senator from our region, he and I were the deciding votes to land the infrastructure package. It was a 2/3 vote proposal. They didn't have the votes, and Senator Cannella and I negotiated the deal with Governor Brown. And as a result of that, the Republicans love to blame me for gas prices, as the Infrastructure Act included, a gas tax increase. Essentially, it had been a flat rate since early 1990s, and we adjusted it for inflation so as to make sure that there was actually money to invest in both repairing our roads and our aging infrastructure, but also investing in public transit and other new investments. I don't shy away from that vote. I think it did more good than bad, and I'd vote for it 100 more times. But the Republicans love to, if you drive up and down the 99 as you come to visit my district, or maybe go down to Rudy Salas's district to the south of me, you will see lots of billboards with a very unflattering picture of me, being blamed for the gas tax. The second issue that the Republicans have used against me since I think they started using it in 2014 or 2016 is they take every fundraising event or thing that I've participated in over the 20 years I've been involved in state politics, and they say things like Adam Gray is going to Pebble Beach and he's living a high luxurious lifestyle, and they try to obviously make it look like I'm running around living the life of luxury on the taxpayers. So those are their two favorite Adam Gray criticisms. And the reason, I think they stick to those is because the rest of my record, whether it's on public safety or agriculture or water, is a record that's consistent with the voters in this district, right? And I think, I've certainly got examples, very public examples of even voting against my own party at times on issues where I thought my own party was wrong for what our district needed. So that they can't really attack me on my record very successfully. So they try to obviously confuse the voters on those topics, the gas tax and the life of luxury. Which I can tell you, if anyone wants to come join me on a campaign, it's far from a life of luxury, but I appreciate the motivation they provide.
Another question.
This is the last question of my we talked about the electric power generation in the state. I would love to buy electric vehicles, but there's not enough electricity as it is now. If we're going to go to electric vehicles, electric lawn implements, that sort of thing, electric appliances, when there's a brownout, we can't charge it, we can't operate these. So how can we increase or should we increase the electric power generation in our state so we can move to electric?
I'm going to need a little help with that one because
So he was asking about what your thoughts are on the state of our electrical grid and our ability to generate enough power to power all of the electric vehicles and other electricity usage that we want to use to get away from fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think our electrical grid, not unlike our water infrastructure, our roads and bridges infrastructure, is underinvested in and antiquated and in disrepair. And I think one of the great challenges, California has been amazing at being a leader in climate change policy as it relates to like pushing the envelope on renewable energies, both from the sense of making requirements like the renewable portfolio standard that requires all of our utilities to have 20, 30, 40, 50% at some point, investments in renewables, right? Or getting that power from renewables. But the thing, if I'm going to be critical of, frankly, I'll be critical of Democrats and California in that a mistake I think we've made is we've not struck the right balance when it comes to moving public infrastructure projects forward, particularly ones that are in the interest, which are in the public interest, both from an environmental perspective and a public safety perspective, transit perspective. And I'll give you a specific example. When we see, grid projects and or public transit projects like high-speed rail, when we see the costs and the timelines on those projects explode and continue to be delayed because of some of our overly litigious, overly regulatory burdened environment, we're making a mistake, right? Because we've, particularly in the case where we have projects that are going to, do the good of helping us transition, away from oil and gas and carbon, that public good ought to outweigh, NIMBY litigation over trying to build public projects, right? And we ought to be able to move public projects. And I think there's a balance to be struck. When you look at China and the expansion of high-speed rail, for example, if a city or a town gets in the way of a high-speed rail projects in China, they just move the city or town. That's one extreme. And then in California, we have the other extreme where we can't build anything in any kind of a budget on any kind of a decent time frame. And I think we all ought to put our heads together and find some middle ground, particularly in the space of energy development and public transit, where we can move projects that do a public good forward quickly, right? Because another thing I think that's really dangerous is when you've got elected officials voting for things, but then those things don't actually get built for 30 years, and the elected official who voted for it is long gone, right? So the voters never get the chance to make a connection between somebody voting for something and pushing a policy that makes a positive difference in their lives because the timelines are too great. And I think we could do a lot better. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to cut red tape and bureaucracy. I think it's an Achilles heel for Democrats. Is I think sometimes we get so invested in regulation and litigation that we forget to go back and make government work well in a way that produces results for people, so that people can feel good about these projects. Because I would argue that our investments in California in renewable energy, in high-speed rail and other things are really forward-looking and incredibly important to the world, and are actual economic opportunities if we can deliver them in a timely fashion, and as streamlined as possible, right? But it's just something we've not really done well. And I can tell you, as somebody who chaired the Joint Legislative Audit Committee in Sacramento, that was one of my first committee assignments. And I thought it was a great committee. And you had the opportunity to vote on audits of agencies that the governor was obviously overseeing. But I've never seen an audit ordered out of our committee in Sacramento that the governors didn't oppose. You'd have the governor's chief of staff show up and say, oh, well, do we really want to look at this? Because, it might expose that things aren't working that good. I think, we need people. Harry Truman comes to mind when he was president of the United States, somebody who was actually a bureaucracy buster and a Democrat. And I think we need to light the fuse of bureaucracy busting in the Democratic Party again, and show that government can really work well for people, so that people can see, really these great opportunities that, we have the better policy ideas in our party, and we need to show people that. Sorry for the long answer, but I'm super interested in this topic.
We have another question.
And lately in California, you see that the making some movement, so definitely discouraging. Everybody felt about that, and maybe on a broader issue to use to agree and support the infrastructure bill that we have.
I'm gonna need a little bit help on that one too.
She was asking about what are your thoughts about distributed solar, and whether you agree with that, and also some of the PUC rulings recently that would seem to restrict that, and also what your thoughts are on the infrastructure bill that was passed a couple of years.
The infrastructure bill at the federal level, I assume is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and distributed solar, the issue of solar in California under the PUC recent rulings about that would prohibit or restrict it or not incentivize it as much.
Right. Well, I think the PUC is struggling to, achieve some balances in our solar policy. I know in Sacramento, it's been a ongoing debate for some time. For example, over, who's bearing the burden, right, of our investments in solar and our different solar policies. And I think there's a sentiment that it is too often falling, some of those burdens are falling on, some of the least able to pay people in California. But I generally think we've got to lean into solar as a opportunity future. And I think where it is disproportionately burdensome, some of these policies, in the final kind of fiscal impact, I think that's where the state needs to come in and frankly subsidize more heavily across the board, so that we can continue to advance the technology in the most cutting edge ways, right? The second part of the question, remind me again, was
The infrastructure bill.
yeah, the infrastructure bill. Yeah, the infrastructure bill. I'm sure, like anything in Washington D.C., I'm sure I can pick it apart and find 5 or 6 things I don't like. But having said that, overall, I'm incredibly supportive of government investing as heavily as possible in infrastructure. I think it's the best thing government does. When we invest in infrastructure, we set off the private sector on all kinds of investments that create economic opportunity, jobs, et cetera, for communities. And so I'd actually like to see us, lean in more heavily in infrastructure. The only thing that concerns me is that we made that huge infrastructure investment, and then now we're going to see probably a negative or an adverse reaction politically to doing that again for some time. And I think it's something we ought to be doing a hell of a lot more of on a consistent basis. And housing is a perfect example here in California. Everybody tries to find a way to deal with housing. Well, one way you could incentivize or set off a housing boom would be to put in some of the infrastructure that otherwise is oftentimes paid for by developers, right? In cities and counties. And it's like, if the government actually stepped forward and invested, billions in this, you'd see tons of building go on and actually have opportunities to catch up with the supply demand curve on housing here in California. But very huge fan of infrastructure. I've consistently supported high-speed rail when it was popular and when it wasn't. I've been a consistent voice saying we need to invest in infrastructure. I helped craft the Infrastructure Act in California, and certainly given the opportunity to serve in Congress, I'm going to be a strong advocate for doing even more.
Any other questions on Kyoko?
Yeah. 22 is lost by 564 points, and some of us have been helping making phone calls and so forth. So I'm interested where your campaign is, as well as what you need to accomplish. We have about 40 people here. What would you like us to do?
So Kyoko asked, you lost by only 564 votes in 2022. We feel like with some of the work that we've been doing, we should be able to make up that difference. Where does your campaign sit now? Do you think, where do you need the most help? We have 40 people sitting here that could theoretically help you in some way. What would you like us to do to help you win on November 5th?
I feel like you're doing it in the sense that you all have consistently shown up to be part of our efforts, to just draw attention to the race, right? Get to people at their doors, their phones, through the mail. This district, California's 13th congressional district, had it existed in 2020, which of course redistricting happened, so it didn't exist, but you can go back and look at every precinct that's in this current district, and you can look at the voting data from the last election, and you can see how this district would have voted. And had this district existed in 2020, the House Democratic candidate got 26,000 more votes than the House Republican candidate in this district. In 2022, I lost by 564 votes. So what happened, right? How could you have such a dramatic change in this district? And the answer to that question is that in 2020, in this congressional district, 250,000 people cast a vote. In 2022, 130,000 people cast a vote. And that 120,000 people that didn't show up in 2022, who are they? Well, they're 70% Democrats and independents. So you can quickly see what the problem is, right? If we vote, we win. It's that, I mean, I hate to be, you know, too simple about this, but if we vote, we win. And every door that you all knock on, every phone call that you make, every text message that you make, every postcard that you write touches a voter. And we're going to touch those voters and touch those voters and touch those voters. And obviously the presidential ticket and the election is going to drive a lot of interest, right? Those are factors out of our control, but they're factors that are supporting, supporting a big turnout. And if we get a big turnout, we're going to win this race. 2/3 of these voters have had me on their ballot for 12 years straight, or 12 years, 6 elections straight. So we got to, I can assure you, we're doing our job within the campaign to put forward a product, a candidate that's consistent with the voters that people have voted for, people, a message that people are interested in. And if you guys help us turn voters out, which is, I think, exactly at the heart of every activity you've been involved in, we're going to win this race. And hell, maybe we'll win it by more than we think. Maybe we'll surprise everybody. They'll go, what in the hell happened here? But, that's a good problem that we'll all be happy to have on Wednesday morning after the election. So not to again have too simple an answer, but I just feel like the work that you're doing is just critical to the outcome of this election. And I can't tell you how appreciative I am to you for it, for that work. So thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? No more questions? Oh, there's one in the very back. One more.
Two more? Okay.
Not so much a question, but rather an observation. I've been a canvasser in yesterday from Livermore. And local, that today's involvement will get every volunteer and there are many productive things that actually not.
We will form of 70 people. So if we do it 10 times, we will accomplish
So I don't might do very much. No,
Still talking about their experiences canvassing for you the last days and how it's been a great experience. And if we could knock on a few more doors, we will for sure lead you over the finish line. There's one more question. Thank you.
and create a better pathway for citizenship for the immigrants that we should be welcoming to our country that do so much to help move us forward and having you, I'm sure that's something that is also difficult in your district as well.
So the question was about immigration and how to create a pathway for citizenship for immigrants who come to this country seeking a better life. And she just mentioned that that's something that's probably very important to your district too, with respect to agricultural workers.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing what comes to mind immediately whenever we talk about immigration is the lack of honesty, and oftentimes from both parties on this topic. And on the Republican side, you have these folks that want to vilify immigrants who come here from all over the world. And certainly where I live in the San Joaquin Valley, there's 72 different languages spoken here in Merced County. We have people who have Sikh Indians to Laotian, Hmong, Dutch, Portuguese, dairymen, people of all different backgrounds, and of course, people from all over Mexico and Latin America who have come here because you can essentially build a better life by working with your hands, right? No matter how unskilled perhaps a worker you are, whatever your background is, if you're willing to work hard, you can come to an agricultural valley like this and you can work hard and build something. And generations of immigrants have done that. But, Republicans want to paint immigrants, they want to scare people, and they want to paint immigrants with a brush that, these are a bunch of criminals and terrorists and whatnot coming and pouring over the border and taking our jobs and this and that. Meanwhile, I can tell you, I do work, I own a construction and residential commercial construction company that I'm partners with my cousin in, and that I grew up in agriculture, and getting people to work in these jobs is a challenge, period. So this notion that folks are just flowing over the border and we're not bringing enough skilled workers and people to fill even some of these skilled and unskilled positions that we need, right? But then on the Democratic side, if you ask a Democratic elected official at the federal level what the answer is to immigration, inevitably you're going to hear one of kind of two stock responses. And one of them is, well, we need a pathway to citizenship for people that are already here, and we need something for the dreamers, right? These kids that were brought over here and lived most of their lives here. And where I say that's not really an honest answer is that we all know that has nothing to do with solving immigration, right? Like, if you want a better immigration process, right, that's better for the immigrant and safer for the country and controls the flow of undocumented immigration, like, none of those things have anything to do with that. That just solves a legitimate problem for people who are here and undocumented, but it doesn't actually deal with quotas from different countries or any of the underlying root causes of our failed system, right? And so I just say that to say nobody's really being honest, and I think people in the San Joaquin Valley really understand that, because we know how important, we're all immigrants here, whether you're an Okie, or a Mexican American or a Dutch American or Portuguese, whatever it is, people have come here, over the last 150 years. And so I think we have a different appreciation for the importance of immigration, but we also have a cynicism, I think, towards both parties, in that you've got one party that trying to scare everybody to get votes for their cause, and another party who refuses to actually talk holistically about all the different, parts of immigration policy. And I don't know why we can't be thoughtful enough to say that we two things could exist simultaneously. We could have a secure border where we control immigration and everybody goes through the legal process. And we can also have a compassionate and streamlined immigration system that works for people and actually brings workers that we need, right, to continue to grow our economy and our country. Like, those two things can happen at the same time. And the inability of our government to walk and chew gum, or at least of our two political parties to admit that we can walk and chew gum, is part of what's broken in Washington, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any more questions? Seeing none, we will let you go, Adam. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope we're going to have go for you as best we can.
Well, I just want to say again how appreciative I am of all of your efforts individually and as a group. And we're going to win this election, and it's because of the hard work that you're putting in and others. And I'm grateful for it. And I promise you, I'm going to work as hard as I can from now till the end of this thing. And let's all celebrate on the back end with a new Congress that's actually something we can be proud of in this country.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.